This plan starts with the foundation of in-person learning in alignment with Iowa statute, requiring that 50% of instruction time occurs in the classroom and prioritizes core subjects. Schools have flexibility to meet that and other options if public health circumstances occur, making it an unattainable goal for them. Our plan also puts the decision on whether or not a student learns 100% through remote learning in the hands of parents, recognizing differences between students and families and how their student best learns or what some of their other family circumstances may be. We need to keep our next generation learning, growing, and preparing for a bright future. And online learning is an essential component of that, but it can't make up for the critical role our schools play in the development of social and emotional skills that our children rely on. We also have to be mindful of the achievement gap of underprivileged students and how disparities that exist in online learning resources could serve to worsen that gap. Recently, Dr. Redfield, the head of the CDC, reminded parents, teachers, and decision makers to consider the substantial negative public health consequences of children not being back in school. He rightly observed that it's not an issue of school openings versus public health. It really is public health versus public health. After 6 months of the pandemic, there's also mounting research that shows children are less likely to transmit and contract COVID-19. According to the CDC, among nearly 150,000 cases of COVID-19 in the U.S., between February 12th and April 2nd, only about 2,500 or 1.7% were in children. This weekend on Face the Nation, U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Hill said that schools in communities with less than a 10% positivity rate should reopen. On a 14-day rolling average positivity rate, 93 of Iowa's counties, including Polk, Lynn, Dubuque, Scott, Woodbury, and others, would meet that definition. Finally, recent research published in the peer-reviewed journal Pediatrics concludes that children infrequently transmit COVID-19 to each other or adults, and that schools, provided that they practice social distancing and consider rates of transmission in their community, can and should reopen this fall. So key takeaways: COVID-19 poses low risk to school-aged children, based on low transmission in the community. Children are not driving the pandemic, and transmission from students to students and teachers have been low. With proper tools and resources, we can reopen safely, protecting students, teachers, staff, and families. Today, we will be announcing that the Department of Education, in coordination with the Iowa Department of Public Health, is releasing additional guidance for Iowa schools to use in the event of students or staff testing positive, substantial spread in a classroom, and processes for temporarily moving classrooms or buildings to online instruction. First, back to school doesn't mean back to normal. There will be enhanced hygiene protocols, social distancing mitigation measures in classrooms and other places, and online education will continue to play a role in educating Iowa kids. Second, I've received a number of questions, I've gotten a question, a number of times about why the state needs to be involved in this at all. Why can't it be left up to school districts and local public health departments? So most Iowans probably don't know that the vast majority, 237 out of 327 school districts, are in multiple counties. 2 of them are even in 5 different counties. So if you look at the map, I don't know which way it is, there it is. If you look at the map, the orange represents school districts that are in 3 or more counties. So the guidance and data, for instance, in the West Des Moines School District, that the West Des Moines School District gets, would come from Polk County, and it could be different from what they get in Dallas County, for example. And if you're in the Nashua, Plainfield School District in Northeast Iowa, you're in Chickasaw, Floyd, Bremer, and Butler counties. And that's why I think it's so important for us to have clear statewide guidelines, as well as continue to coordinate with our local public health partners. And just as we've done throughout COVID-19, these guidelines are based on state data put into context of CDC guidelines. The positivity rate over the previous 14 days, and student and staff absenteeism will both be central to informing these local decisions. The Department of Education will be sending out a survey to school districts across the state to find out what their need for PPE is, and the state will supply an initial 30-day supply.
We know that our schools are critical for providing a wide variety of services for children, and that includes things like social and emotional development, behavioral support, and regular meals. And all of these reasons and more are why it's so important for children to return to school. In Iowa, children under the age of 18 make up only 6% of the reported positive cases. So that means that the children here in Iowa are not the primary drivers of this pandemic. And in fact, we know that children are less likely to become infected, and when they do, they appear to have a less severe illness. Now, we've also seen some scientific reports coming out of other countries looking specifically at contact tracing in school settings. And this has been done in places like France, Australia, and Ireland. And they've suggested that transmission among students is not as likely between each other in a school setting as it is in a household setting. Now, we've also seen some early reports that indicate that COVID cases may vary even among children as a population. So, for example, children who are older, 10 to 17, are more likely to become infected, and children who have underlying conditions might be more likely to have more serious consequences or become infected. And it's all consistent with what we've seen so far in that this virus seems to have a greater and more serious impact as age increases and for people who have underlying conditions. A safe return to school is going to depend on our communities and families' readiness, and this is going to include a commitment to the protective measures that we know can help slow the spread of this virus. So that means the consistent use of cloth face coverings when in public. It means socially distancing by 6 feet whenever possible. It means staying home when we're sick or if we've been exposed to somebody who has COVID. And it means washing our hands frequently with soap and water or hand sanitizer. It's also important to know that there's a plan, to develop a plan for when we identify a case in a school setting, which we expect will happen. And so I want to take a moment to walk through the current public health guidance for what we do to investigate a case of COVID. So this is going to begin with a notification to public health of a positive result. And at first, the first thing we're going to do is public health will recommend quarantine or staying home for all household contacts of that positive case. We're then also going to work very closely with the school and with the family and case themselves to better understand what other exposures could have occurred and what other recommendations need to be made for any other potentially exposed people, whether they're staff or students in any setting. And so schools will work very closely with local public health when they're made aware of the case, and they're going to help determine who would have been in close contact. And right now that means within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. So we'll work together to figure out where that could have occurred. Was it in a classroom? Was it in transportation on a bus? Was it during the lunch period or another setting? So we'll come up with that list of people who would have been exposed, and the recommendation will be for people who have been in close contact with a confirmed case that they need to stay home or quarantine for a period of 14 days. Now, when we talk about quarantine, that means people who are still healthy but who have been exposed to somebody who has COVID. If that person were to themselves become sick, they should seek health care and get tested as appropriate, and if they were positive, they would then isolate as what ill people do. This is a very fluid situation, and we continue to remain flexible, and we might need to adjust our guidance again in the future as we learn new things and as the science develops, and we'll continue to do that in conjunction with our public health and education partners.
Education is fundamental to the well-being of our children, and our teachers are essential to ensuring that our school kids return to learn rather than mark time and lose ground. And I know that together we can do this safely and responsibly. Recently I was in Sioux Center and I had a young man who was a high school senior come up to me and he thanked me for letting him play baseball this summer. He said it really meant a lot to him as a senior and to his teammates to get the opportunity to play this last season. You know, we were the only state in the country to reopen summer sports, summer high school baseball and softball. And although Iowans might have mostly heard about those schools that unfortunately ended their season early because of COVID-19, the statistics in both baseball and softball show an unqualified success. 96% of baseball teams finished their season out of 338 teams. 97% of softball teams finished out of 335 teams. And that all began with parents and students simply saying, all we want is a chance to play ball. Iowa schools, the high school athletic unions, coaches, players, and parents work together to play their seasons safely and responsibly, and are a good example for all of us. We can do this, and we can do this safely.